online. Thank you for taking time today to gather and we're share input for us here. I just started, why are we here? And the biggest thing is just to listen. MEPA is a very important part of what we do. And we at the agency, we at Helena, because we're traveling around the state just a little bit, we don't feel like we have every answer. And the best path forward is through the wisdom of multitude of counselors. And so that's why we're here. We're here to listen. Tonight, we honor what MEPA is in part, right? So it's a public process. It is an opportunity for the public to be engaged. It's an opportunity to collect information, share back into many states that have an input on what the state does for state actions. We had great attendance and input from Billings. And I learned a little bit too. I just would share and ask that as you step to the podium, we'll call on you today. As you step to the podium, be as clear and specific as you can with what you would like us to accomplish. Whether that includes MEPA in the public process or MEPA engagement, or whether that includes a climate component, be specific about what you would like us to consider. That gets us into the end of our public listening sessions and our public engagement process with the best information possible. We welcome your thoughtful input tonight as you speak with us. I want to emphasize that we are taking time on purpose to be here. We're here to listen. We're here to be in your presence, to take time and take time out, just as you have. And I would just ask for all respectful dialogue to engage with it from the podium. We know for certain that there are different views in the room, probably wildly different views, and that's exactly why we're here. We respect all views. I want to acknowledge my great team that is here tonight, and also for the other sessions, for those of you who work each and every day, listening, even online tonight, those that are engaged in the process, taking notes and helping me gather the input. And I'd like now to really introduce Rebecca Harbidge. She is our Public Policy Director at the Montana Department of Environmental Quality. I'm Chris Dorrington. I don't think I said that. I apologize. I'm the Director at Montana Department of Environmental Quality. I introduced Rebecca. She's going to share some thoughts on MEPA to begin, and then we will do a little bit of math. So because we have 2 hours, we're going to share a little bit with the available time by the number of people who would like to speak, and that will be our time limit. If you be respectful of that time limit, what that does is allow the other people who want to speak the opportunity to come up, and it doesn't limit it. If we have minutes at the end and we're not at the 2 hour mark, I will assure you that we'll stay and we'll add individuals who haven't had an opportunity to weigh in. What we will do is go through the list in the room first, and then we'll go online. And with that, I will introduce Rebecca Harbidge. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Director Dorrington. Like Chris said, my name is Rebecca Harbidge. Hopefully you all can hear me in the room and online. Like Chris said, I'm the Public Policy Director at the Department of Environmental Quality. Been at DEQ for about 10 years, so I am very familiar with the work that we do and the MEPA process. What I want to do here at the beginning is just run through MEPA basics. I know many of you are familiar with the Montana Environmental Policy Act, but there may be folks joining us tonight who are coming in with a little less familiarity with the act itself. So I'm going to try to keep this very brief. I have 6 points that I'd like to make about the Montana Environmental Policy Act. First, what is MEPA? Well, MEPA is a process. It's a process through which state agencies, state officials are required to analyze the potential impacts of proposed projects on the environment and share that analysis with the public before we take action on those applications. Number 2, what is covered by MEPA? MEPA covers what's known as a state action. And a state action is anything from a project that a state agency is actually proposing and implementing itself, to a permit approval, to funding that's provided for a project that's going to be implemented by a different entity. I want to emphasize that this is not limited to DEQ. So MEPA applies to state actions that are taken by any state official, any state agency. And it is specifically focusing on state actions that have a potential to impact the human environment. Number 3 is that I had 6 points, so we're halfway done. MEPA is not permitting. So a lot of times the two get smashed together and we think that there's this one process that state agencies go through when we receive an application. That is in part true, but there are 2 separate statutes that drive our process. At DEQ, MEPA review is triggered when we receive a permit application, and it happens parallel to our permitting review. It's not the same thing. Montana's permitting laws, those statutes are where you'll find standards, pollution limits, requirements that projects have to comply with. Nothing is permitted by DEQ that does not comply with the permitting laws and the limits and standards that are set in those laws to protect the environment. On the other hand, MEPA, which I said is parallel, so they are related. MEPA is about looking before you leap. You may have heard this term tossed around before. It's really focused on knowing and disclosing those potential impacts of a project, even if those impacts are outside of the agency's permitting authority. So I know that can be a complicating fact, but there are projects that are submitted to DEQ, and we take a hard look under MEPA at all of the potential impacts on the human environment, whether or not DEQ actually has permitting authority to stop or control those impacts. MEPA does not give state agencies any additional authority to deny or modify a project based on the potential impacts of that project. Point number 4, MEPA, oh, sorry, I'm already on 4. Point number 5, MEPA is all about producing these reviewed documents. So MEPA in practice, what does that mean? If we say we're going to take a hard look at something, we will go through a review, we'll look into all of the potential impacts on the physical environment, the human environment, and the result of that is a review document known as either an environmental assessment or EA, or an environmental impact statement or EIS. So those are phrases that you might see tossed around when we're talking about MEPA. Depending on the significance of the potential impacts, that is what determines whether we prepare an EA or an EIS. So what that means is EAs are typically prepared for projects where it's clear the impacts are not going to be significant, but they can also be a first step. So we can also move forward and prepare an EA to help the agency understand whether there will be significant impacts. If we find that impacts may be significant, we will require further review in the form of an EIS, which is a much more in-depth, detailed document. Final point on MEPA 101 is MEPA is a public process. MEPA analyses are public documents. So DEQ puts these documents together, the EA or the EIS, and we publish those for review and for public comment. Specifically under MEPA, public involvement is determined by the level of complexity of the project, the level of complexity of the expected impacts, and also the level of public interest related to that project. I will say comments are valuable to us. We definitely take them into account. As the director said earlier, we don't always know all of the potential impacts of a project. We are staff, we sit in an office, most of us in Helena, we do our due diligence, but folks who live in the communities and in the neighborhoods where projects are proposed oftentimes have special knowledge of that area. And so comments are very much appreciated when you can submit information to us that we might not have been aware of already. And so we have had projects, I will say that we've taken public comment into account, and we have used that public comment to shift between maybe an EA versus an EIS because of the comments that we received in that process. So that is your MEPA 101. I hope that was helpful. If not, my contact info is on the DEQ webpage. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. I am always happy to talk about MEPA. We have some other experts in the room as well who can talk to you afterwards if you'd like to catch one of us. All right, moving on to the next piece of this agenda. I just wanted to share some expectations and ground rules for tonight. We have a good crowd here. I'm really appreciative of that. I'm not sure how many we have in the room, but we do have about 30 attendees joining us on Zoom in addition to folks here in person. So I just have a few points I'd like to make before we open it up for public comment. First, specifically, this is not a venue to comment on specific projects. So DEQ reviews specific permit applications and we accept public comment on those through a separate process. If you have concerns about a specific project that is open for public comment right now, I encourage you to go through the typical channels, go onto our website, look at public participation opportunities, and submit your comments on that specific project. Tonight is intended to be a public discussion and not a debate. There are likely a variety of perspectives present with us tonight, and so my ask would be that we listen respectfully to all of the perspectives as they're shared and just try to keep an open mind that there may be folks in the room who feel differently about things or have different ideas than you have. We are seeking solutions-oriented comments and suggestions. So anything that you can provide that will help point the agency in the right direction in terms of how we should move forward with our MEPA analyses will be super appreciated and very much taken into account. We have a lot of people. We have hit quite a few signed up to comment. And so I do want to recognize that time in person to comment tonight is limited. So we will be going through and counting the number of folks who have signed up indicating they want to comment. And we're going to be dividing the rest of the time for tonight by the folks commenting. We'll try to make sure that everybody has enough time to say what they would like to say. But my ask is that we recognize that there is limited time and there are a lot of people who would like to speak. And so let's try to share the floor here. And if you have a comment that you know has already been shared, if this isn't just a vote, if you have a comment you want to be on the record and make sure we have your name, please come up to the podium and just say, I agree with the previous commenter. That would be super helpful. We will make sure that that's part of our record moving forward. Lastly, this is not your final opportunity to speak on this process. So tonight is the second of 4 public listening sessions. We have one tomorrow night in Missoula. Anybody is welcome to attend that in person or register to attend on Zoom. And then again on November 1st, we have an online only listening session that will be held in the afternoon for folks who may not be able to make it to any of these or attend an evening meeting. In addition, the comment period is actually open until December 1st. So you have significantly more time to prepare written comments and submit those to our online portal. There are some handouts with QR codes. If you want to scan the QR code, it will take you straight into the comment portal. If you need help figuring out how to scan the QR code, I am more than happy to help you figure that out because I would love to see your comments reflected in the portal. With that, I will remind everybody that we are recording, so take that into account when you are providing your comments. And we're excited to hear from you. Thank you so much for being here.
Excellent. Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate that. We have about 50 commenters and about 110 minutes. So we'll cap you at 2 minutes. If we have to go long, as I said at the very end, we'll take that into consideration, make a game day decision at the very end. First up, now, the other thing is, if your penmanship isn't perfect, then I mess with your name, just simply correct me when you get to the podium. And my apologies at the start. Mark Juneman. First. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mark Judeman. I live in Helena. I spent a lot of time at our ranch, at our family's cow-calf ranch, where I grew up north of Helena. As a matter of fact, I'm missing helping with pregnancy testing this afternoon to comment here. I'm a graduate of MSU and I spent over 30 years working for a major oil and gas company as an exploration and development geophysicist. There have been a lot of changes at our ranch since the 1970s, especially during the last 10 years or so. There are streams that ran at least part of the year that don't run at all now. We have lots of fire weather days that we didn't used to have and have had to limit some of our operations to make sure that we don't start a fire just by driving into our pastures. We have a smoke season now, but when I was young, it was very unusual to have smoky days. And we've seen reductions in our grass production and dryland hay production, such that we've needed to make significant reductions in our herd size. These are real economic impacts on our Montana ranch and Montana ranching family. It's pretty clear that these changes are driven by fossil fuel climate change, and the state of Montana, through the DEQ, needs to take action now to factor climate impacts into their decision making. Fortunately, the DEQ and other state agencies already have the tools that they need to analyze the impacts of proposed projects, such as power plants, refineries, coal mines, on the climate. They just need to start using these tools. For instance, even the US Supreme Court has supported assumptions behind social cost of greenhouse emissions calculations from the federal government. And those are embedded in the readily available SCGHG tool for analysis. I ask you to do the analysis and inform permitting decisions now to protect our clean and healthful environment as you are obligated to do by the health decision. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Kevin Allison. Ken Allison. Mr. Allison, welcome.
Thank you very much. You all are analysts. So I would say be of the environment, be analysts, be deep analysts, take deep dives in analyzing, and be visionary in analyzing. What are the possibilities? Lock in all the possibilities, even if they're 1%. I think that's a good analyst. I think MEPA and NEPA, I'll say NEPA are all great. It's a policy, but it's also known as the people's policy. I don't want to say the people's law, but the people's policy. I really love section 17, the determination of significant impact, 17.4.608. I think that's a wonderful phrase. I think that's a great legacy, and I think we got to keep the engine going. You can't make a right-hand turn. We can't say the rules don't apply to me. I'm going to do whatever I want. I would guess MEPA has done a lot to stop things that could have been worse. You know, Maxie Flats in Kentucky, Love Canal, Berkeley Pit. I don't want to be specific project, but everybody knows about the Berkeley Pit, so that's general. But the determination of significant impact, I think that's a genius phrase, and we need to go ahead and keep those words golden. Reminds me of teaching my son to drive.
Wrap up, Mr. Allison.
Yeah, he's really good. He knows all the rules. He's 18, but by the time he's 24, he's a little loose, and he may drive over a cliff. So that's what the rules and regulations do, keep us from going over a cliff on some bad projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. Feel that all, Steve. Welcome, Mr. Van Alstyne.
Would you like me to say my name or is it good?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
Did I do all right?
Valentine, but I'm.
Van Alstyne. Yes.
I've been a high school teacher for 22 years. I'd like you to know that an increasing number of students are concerned about climate change. Some have become active in climate change reduction, but many are just simply depressed, to be honest. Every spring I see students trying to participate in sports while trying to breathe wildfire smoke. Your work at DEQ is extremely important to these young people and their futures. Already our environment is heating up. Even today, the temperature is abnormally high.
I respectfully ask you to immediately begin considering greenhouse gases as part of your MEPA analyses. Time is of the essence. The court has ordered the state to do this now, and our youth are depending on us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kendall. Mr. David Hoffman. David Hoffman. Hoffman. If there's two of you, I apologize. Welcome, Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Director Dorrington. I am going to rely on some of the testimony we'll hear from others in regard to specific changes. But if the question is whether Montana's existing MEPA framework is up to the regulatory challenges of the next 50 years, the answer is unequivocally no. A look at MEPA's 50-year history reveals a broad and vague statute that has been the subject of protracted debate since its inception in 1971. Since then, the legislature has attempted to amend MEPA more than 128 times, and now over 80 MEPA challenges have been brought before the courts. These statistics don't point to a well-functioning law serving the best interests of Montana citizens and the environment. On the contrary, the conflicting interpretations of MEPA by the Montana legislature, state agencies, and the judiciary generated tremendous confusion for both public and industry members. Northwestern Energy is deeply concerned that regulatory uncertainty under MEPA may hinder our state's future development of critical infrastructure. Many of the infrastructure projects in which Northwestern is engaged in are 5, 10, and even 20 years in the making. And each time the rules change midstream, it adds time and expense and decreases the likelihood the project will be built. Simply put, MEPA's constantly shifting framework in which the meaning and application of the law change with each new permanent or passing court decision is not conducive to the long-term planning Northwestern Energy needs to deliver safe and reliable energy service to our customers. For this reason, we strongly support DEQ's efforts to modernize, clarify MEPA, and we look forward to continuing this critical conversation in the following months. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Nicholas Duval. Welcome, Mr. Duval.
Hi, I am one of Helena Alstein's students. I am 17 and I really hope to have a place for my children to grow up one day. So I really think it's important that you guys do the best you can to keep our environment clean and healthful, just like the Health Act recommends. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duval. Senator Denville. Welcome.
Thank you. Is this on? Oh, yeah.
Yes,
there,
ma'am.
there we go. I overheard somebody say it was hard to hear. So, good evening,
Good evening.
Director Dorrington, Deputy Director Fear, Administrator Nowakowski, and Policy Director Harvard.
Yep.
Did I get that right? All right, and all the other DQ hardworking folks in the room too. I'm Mary Ann Dudwell. I'm a state senator. I represent Helena and East Helena, Senate District 42. I just want to ask you to follow the court order recently that permanently enjoins House Bill 971 and a part of Senate Bill 557. They are unconstitutional, and we said so in the legislature, but the majority didn't listen. Those two bills hamstring MEPA, the public and litigants. The bills were ramrodded through the session. Please reverse them and restore our beloved Montana Environmental Policy Act. I also, as long as I'm up here, I'm going to ask you to proactively implement a can't talk tonight, a climate mitigation and carbon emissions reduction plan. And you know how to do this. In fact, a bill I've sponsored session after session, but was always killed, was expertly written by Montana Environmental Information Center and then legislative analyst Sonia Nowakowski, now DEQ administrator for air, energy, and mining. We called it the Montana Climate Action Act in the 1929 session, in the 1917, in the 2019 session, oh my gosh, 2019 session, it was HB 193, HB 150 in 2021, and SB 532 this past session. But to no avail. The bill implements a fee on the highest carbon polluters. So these polluters pay for their damage to our environment and climate and public health. It creates some special revenue funds for DEQ and state commerce to remediate and mitigate damage to our air, water, and communities. And very important, the Climate Action Act lays out emissions reductions requirements for these polluters. So I have a ton more to say, but I will put them in my comments in writing, because obviously I can't speak for it all the time.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Diana Hammer. Welcome, Ms. Hammer.
Thank you.
Just because it was brought up, for anyone who does speak, if you really move into the mic, then everyone else can hear, including those online. Thank you.
Can you hear me all right? Hello, my name is Diana Hammer, and thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment. I'm a former life scientist with the US EPA, and I spent most of my career working on MEPA or MEPA-like projects or projects that follow the MEPA process. And I can't tell you how important MEPA is for the state of Montana and all its residents. I'm also a mom, and I, like many of you, I think we had the opportunity to enjoy our beautiful state and play in the rivers and the woods. And I hope that my kids, and sometimes at some point maybe I'll even have grandkids, I hope they have the same opportunity. But what we heard really clearly in the held case and Judge Seeley's decision is all that is at risk with climate change. It's here, it's happening, we know it, we know what to do. And there's a lot of really good, smart people at DEQ who have the tools. You know what to do, the law is there. And so we just ask that you do it without delay. We don't need a committee, we don't need modernization, we don't need streamlining, we need action, and we need it now. So please, I ask you for our kids, your kids, future generations to implement the law as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hammer. Dr. Gastovich. Welcome, Mr. Gastovich.
Thank you. I'm Doug Gastovich, and I've been a teacher for over 20 years. I've taught in 3 different states, Montana being one, Nevada being another, and Wyoming being also another. Everyone's pretty knowing, it's knowing that Wyoming is prevalent for coal and mining. And because of that, I was getting certain pay in the other 2 states. And when I moved to Wyoming, my pay was up. It went up by $20,000. And that's because of the mining and coal. And money isn't, the point of this. The point of this is these young kids that came out to support their future. And I don't think it's being supported very well. And I just hope that someday, when we're old people are all gone, these young people have a place that's healthy so they can raise their kids. And I hope that that is taken care of. And I appreciate all of you, the women and men up here in front of me. You're doing your job. But the job really is to take care of the future, the young ones in this world, and I hope that happens. God bless and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. David Smith. Welcome, Mr. Smith.
Director Dorrington. Name is David Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Montana Contractors Association. Just as a reminder as to what was mentioned earlier, that MEPA is a policy act and is intended as an evaluation of environmental impacts. It's not intended to be an act that creates new regulatory requirements that have not gone through the normal legislative or regulatory processes. One thing that should be looked at in this process is at minimizing duplication and a number of permitting acts that require equivalent information and public participation and comment. Those should be treated as functional equivalents and should be exempted from meeting if they have met certain criteria. A MEPA analysis is subjective depending upon perspectives. You could have a new project in a similar area of an ongoing project, but because someone new comes in, if they can file litigation over the new one, even though impacts are the same, just because of the timing. Without appropriate standards, MEPA has and can be abused to essentially make the regulatory process subject to permitting by the judiciary. The compliance with regulatory requirements can already be challenged, but MEPA gives the ability to slow or stop critical projects because of the subjective nature of it. Creates uncertainty both in timing and financial impacts. Depending on the project or the permit, how can anyone have certainty that someone will argue the analysis is not broad enough? Is it limited to the permit boundary and immediate adjacent area, or can a judge say that the analysis has to be extended to state, regional, or global impacts? In the construction world, my members, Montana Contractors Association construction members, they provide materials or construct things like bridges, highways, housing, wind turbines, and solar farms. And they all need an economical source of materials that are only available not by wish, but by geology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Joe Stephens. Welcome, Mr. Stephens.
Thank you. Yeah, Chris Stephens, I live in Helena. And just to say what I'd really like to emphasize now is the urgency of doing something about climate change. One of the big things that I've enjoyed about Montana are the lakes, reservoirs, and rivers. And over the past decades, especially more recently, the changes in the volume of water that we have, the temperature of the water, and how the levels of water and the temperature of water has affected the aquatic life and the quality of the rivers and lakes and streams. And I think it's indisputable how climate change is adversely affecting our state, our country, and our globe. And I just feel we need to do everything we can to change the direction of climate change and do it as soon as possible. And I kind of put myself in your position, and I look myself at the Health versus Montana decision as being very liberating. Now we can be free to look at the effects of greenhouse gas emissions and their effect on climate change for each individual project. And I would ask you to, as soon as possible, incorporate that in your evaluation of the project as far as permitting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stephens. John Brown. Welcome, Mr. Brown.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for allowing us to comment and to this dialogue. My name is John Brown. I'm originally from Circle and a lot of time in the farming world there, and have been I've done a lot of things since then, but what I've done in the past, not what I'm here to talk about, is what I'm here, what I've been called to do here today. And that is an unfamiliar and a little bit uncomfortable position for me, because like, many of you in the room, I'm a grandfather, a grandparent, and in that position, those children of the future, my grandchildren and their children, become more present in my awareness, as they will with you, hopefully. And they're asking me, through the fabric of our Constitution and MEPA, to speak for them and confirm that we do know what to do to create a world that is clean and healthful for them and their future. And all we need to do is do that. And what we do in Montana is a headwater state. Water goes to 3 different oceans from Montana. Things that we do here have disproportionate amount of influence over the rest of the world, just as the Helena versus Montana case set a precedent that is spreading out all over the world to inspire us to do what we know how to do. We don't need, as Mark Jacobson said, no miracles necessary. We know what to do right now. We just have to do it. And for you, it's a challenge. Because there's a difference between our jobs and our purpose. Many times. And our purpose is to continue a world that is livable and enjoyable for those who come after. So thank you for being the interface between today and tomorrow. With you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Helena Hornbein. Welcome, Ms. Hornbein.
Thank you, Director Dorrington. For the record, my name is Melissa Hornbein. I'm a staff attorney with the Western Environmental Law Center. And I would like to thank all of you for making this opportunity possible and creating this opportunity for public engagement. I do want to point out that this public engagement process is not necessary for DEQ to do its job and resume analyzing greenhouse gas and climate impacts in its environmental analyses and EISs. It knows how to do this. It has the information available to do this, and it can do it. I would also like to push back against the idea that MEPA is a purely procedural statute and that procedural equates to meaningless when it comes to the permitting process. An adequate MEPA analysis is critically important, and it is a prerequisite to getting a permit issued. So you simply can't separate those two things, and I would urge DEQ not to continue to do so. More importantly, I think that it's very clear from the fact that the legislature explicitly amended MEPA in 2003 to recognize that MEPA serves a critical role in protecting our environmental constitutional rights under Article 9, Section 2 of the Montana Constitution. It made that language explicit, and that role, the importance of that role is not just to inform the public, it is to inform the agency about the consequences of its actions before it makes irreversible and irretrievable commitments of state resources in a manner that oftentimes cannot be undone. And that's certainly the case with greenhouse gas emissions. DEQ conducted greenhouse gas analyses prior to the 2011 MEPA amendment. It knows how to do this. To the extent that it has fallen behind the times, there is a wealth of information available at the federal level for how to conduct analyses and what tools such as carbon budgeting and social cost metrics are available for conducting those analyses. So I would urge DEQ to comply with the First Judicial District Court's order and begin conducting those analyses while it conducts these public outreach efforts as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hornbein. Barbara Chilcott. Wave on, all right. Marilys Filipovich.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak. And I urge DEQ to immediately resume looking at the effect of greenhouse gases on any project you're reviewing. I think the Helena decision made it very clear that you're able to do this, and there are the tools available to you to be able to do it successfully. And as many people have said, I also am a grandparent, and what you do affects all of us Montanans now, and our right to a clean and healthful environment, but also my children and their children and my great-grandchildren to come. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity, and please immediately start reviewing greenhouse gases as part of your job. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ms. Robert Filipovich. Assuming you're related.
Yes. Again, I'm Robert Filipovich. Thanks for the opportunity. Time is of the essence here. And one way that Montanans know that time is passing and the planet is heating is as simple as this. Our two kids graduated out of high school in Helena in the mid-90s, and we always took a picture next to the lilac when they graduated. They were a couple of years apart, and of course we still have those pictures, and the lilac is still in place. All you need to do is look at the calendar, look at the condition of the lilacs on the date, and compare it back to the 90s. You don't need to be a glaciologist, Fabry, for example, who's extended this practice. Again, time is of the essence here. Follow the law, observe how, let's see, or move on, recognizing that the planet is heating. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, it's Maurice. How'd I do?
Pretty close. Nick Fitzmaurice. I'm the energy transition advocate at the Montana Environmental Information Center. Thanks for holding this hearing tonight. A couple things I wanted to talk about tonight. The Montana state constitution states that the state and each person shall maintain and improve a clean and healthful environment for Montana for present and future generations. And as DEQ is well aware, in the recent Helena ruling, we learned that climate impacts from greenhouse gas emissions are clearly encompassed in that. The Constitution therefore charges DEQ as an agent of the state to take into consideration the potential climate impacts of projects undergoing permitting processes. In holding these hearings, DEQ has asked the public how an analysis of greenhouse gas emissions might be included in climate impacts under the MEPA procedures. And I just want to say that the social cost of carbon is currently already used by 14 other states, including Colorado, Nevada, and Washington. And it's federally recommended for use in MEPA environmental reviews, as well as in federal agency budgeting, procurement, and other decision-making. Agencies such as the Department of Transportation and U.S. Postal Service are already using the metric. It's your job to be incorporating this into your analyses, and it's really not that hard. The federally calculated social cost of carbon is currently at about $200 per ton of CO2 emitted, and that can be directly applied to emissions estimated from a project. You can figure out those emissions pretty straightforward by Using the US Energy Information Administration, they have carbon dioxide emissions coefficients by fuel sources. And all you have to do is figure out your fuel source and the volume to be consumed, and you apply the coefficient to determine your total emissions. And if you don't directly emit from a point source in the project, just add a couple of steps, determining approximately energy needs for the project, what kind of fuel is going to be used for that energy, and where you can, from there you can extrapolate using these coefficients. If you're using heavy machinery, you can use the diesel coefficients. And this can be used to deny permits when better low impact project alternatives are available. Just want to say that you've had quite a long time to incorporate climate impacts in this way. And by holding these hearings, you're just putting off the impact and violating your constitutional requirement to enforce this right to a clean and healthful environment. And you're also violating the rights of Montanans you serve. Thank you.
Mr. Fitzmaurice. Dana Lenz.
So first of all, good evening.
Welcome, Ms. Lenz.
Hear me. I'm Dana Lenz. I'm an exchange student from Germany. I'm going to Helena High School here in Montana. And I just wanted to show you that I and my generation care about our future, and that we do want a future, and that in whatever decision is made, that you respect us, my generation, and our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Helena Olson. Welcome, Mr. Olson.
Good evening, Mr. Dorrington. For the record, my name is Alan Olson. I'm the Executive Director of the Montana Petroleum Association. My family's been in Montana since 1885. I have children. I have grandchildren. I've got a great grandchild on the way. My grandkids, my son, my daughters. We do a lot of recreation in Montana. Fly fishing, fishing with the bob rod at the lake. We love the bird hunting. But a little bit of background on MEPA. The intent and purposes in 75-1-102. The legislature, mindful of its constitutional obligations under Article 2, Section 3, and Article 9 of the Montana Constitution, has enacted the Montana Environmental Policy Act. The Montana Environmental Policy Act is procedural, and it is the legislature's intent that the requirements of parts 1 through 3 of this chapter provide for the adequate review of state actions. It goes on to say, except for the extent that an applicant agrees to the incorporation of measures in a permit, it is not the purpose of this chapter to provide for regulatory authority beyond authority explicitly provided for in existing statute to a state agency. Over the last several years, the legislature has continuously defined MEPA as a procedural statute that prescribes a process that is not to be used to decide a result. It was amended 5 times 22 years ago alone to clarify its procedural purpose and not substantive law. It is a policy act and is intended as an evaluation of environmental impacts. It is not to create new regulatory requirements. Too often MEPA has been used as a tool to interfere with, stall, or stop permitting processes that are already controlled by substantive regulatory laws. This creates uncertainty both in permit timing and project budgeting impacts. Too often it is argued that a MEPA analysis is not broad enough. I'm sorry. While compliance with substantive regulatory requirements gives right for legal challenges, whether the limits to MEPA. The Environmental Quality Council come out in their guide to MEPA that people should comment, not vote. Remember that MEPA is an exercise in responsible agency decision-making, not a public referendum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Bruce Fleming.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome, Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Ben. Intending no disrespect, I'd like to partially address my neighbors, as well as yourselves. The quality of this discussion is unbelievably great. I don't know what I expected coming here, but this is super impressive. Be proud of yourself. I think I'm the guy you're looking for. And I think I've brought the solutions that we're talking about. I'm the head of a small business in Great Falls. It's called Montana Renewables. Excuse me. We convert oil for oil seeds. We convert tallow, which is a waste byproduct. We make renewable diesel. We make sustainable aviation fuel. We make renewable hydrogen. We make renewable gas. We've taken a 100-year-old fossil refinery, cut its crude run in half, restored that half with renewables. We are 50% of the way towards the things you were all talking about. If everybody else did that, look where we would be. And yet, the agency has a practical problem. And I think we are causing the demand for action brings a couple things with it. As an engineer, the law of unintended consequences. Doctors call it first do no harm. I call it be careful what you wish for. I was in San Antonio 2 years ago. The electric grid went down. It was no longer reliable. And after 4 days and no trucks moving on the highways, there was no food in any of the stores. I was there. You are that close. Now, that's not representative, it's not expected, but that's also going to become more common if we force the pace too fast. You don't want to force it faster than the engineers are ready. I'm the engineer that we're talking about. And if I said I'm already 50% done with what you want, and I'm asking you to give us the respect and the hearing when we tell you we want to be thoughtful and prudent as we pursue this goal collectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Melanie Phelps. Can you state your name real clearly? Sorry.
Hi, my name is Melanie Phelps. I'm a pre-law political science major at Durham College. And I just had a quick question stating that it's known that Montana is a red state and that unfortunately human rights such as climate change are very political. So my question to you and essentially to the state is in the next legislation, if plans aren't or if bills aren't passed to support climate change and to create a healthier environment for Montanians, would the state or the DEQ or MEPA be willing to create a policy or a plan that would be willing to pay those who have to miss work due to climate change for health reasons? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Phelps. Bob Adams. Welcome, Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Doring, and all of you from the DEQ. Well, I'm an old guy, and I can see the horizon. Therefore, I throw in Mr. Brown over here, talking about who we are concerned with here. My children, my grandchildren, all of yours and mine. This is important, looking forward. And I would say at the outset that it's folks who have spoken like Melissa Hornbein, Mr. Brown, Mr. Judeman, Jill Van Alstyne, and many others with whom I side, and that essentially is this, that I request of you that you, take the tools that you have. That's a refrain that several people have used, but it has to do with, federally, gamed or modeled analysis tools, for greenhouse gases. I know, and you know, that when you do a MEPA analysis on a project, which may be infrastructure for petroleum or carbon emitting sources, you're not required to come up with any directive based on what you analyze. You're going to analyze for the economy, for the environment, for social issues, and certainly you should be able to, and I wish you will, analyze for climate change or climate crisis. One of the gentlemen here said he was here, his family's 1885. I'm not, I'm a newbie, 1969 in Helena. I am a recovering lawyer. I practiced that. I did AP US history in the high schools. I am a park ranger doing bear management in Glacier National Park. I've seen some climate change, but that aside, it's about the future of our children and our grandchildren. The case that was recently decided in April, Hill versus Montana, certainly upheld the clean and healthful environment provision. It judged the MEPA limitation rule a few years ago and Senate Bill 557 and found them unconstitutional in that regard. This case is appealed and probably, in my estimation, be upheld by our Supreme Court. But what I'd like you to do is think about this climate situation. It's vast. It's so difficult for us to get our human hands on it and our thoughts around it. We feel like it's not existential, like the crisis in Israel, Hamas, with Ukraine. But when you look at a hurricane, or you look at forest fires, yes, those are pressing issues, and greenhouse gases play into that. Please, I requested you fold this climate change analysis, which you can do, into your ongoing analysis now, not postponement, please. Are all, well, I feel our survival depends on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Linda Young.
I took my time.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Bob Jones.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Jones.
I'm adding to this next set of rounds here, Jones. Right, and I know that you're facing a lot of ambiguity right now, with the legislative, executive and judicial branches. So moving forward with your analysis now, or quickly, as people are suggesting or asking, I think is very sensible, but also fraught. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. My job for many years has been to help people make decisions in ambiguous circumstances, which is to say almost every circumstance, right? Almost all decisions that we make are made in uncertain circumstances. I heard one of the other speakers ask for certainty, and I don't think they're going to find that anywhere, or almost anywhere, maybe in engineering. So anyway, I'm offering a few ideas that I hope may be of some help for you. I think many people here want to help do your jobs, so I'm trying to speak to that for you.
Thank you.
The first, I'll try to keep these very straightforward, and I'll try to speak in language that'll reach across political boundaries. I've also been an elected official. I'm embarrassed with that, sort of like a recovering attorney. But anyway, right. So I suggest to you in your stakeholder analyses, which you guys I'm sure do a good job of, that there's a stakeholder without a voice. We've heard this from both Browns and Smiths, and now from the Joneses. The primary function I think you guys fill is a voice for future stakeholders. People who are otherwise voiceless are the people you are asked to represent in your analysis. The unborn, if you want to use politically hot terms. So you're giving voice to folks here. Another argument, number two, you are truly conservative. In other words, and you heard this from the industry person, you're trying to avoid unpleasant outcomes.
And that is called conservative, right? You're trying to keep what we value intact, and what most of us value. Am I time almost? What we value is.
Continue on.
All right, thank you. 3, when there is no clear policy available to you, in my experience, you fall back on principle. So that's number 3, and you've got plenty, number 4, of a principle based in science. Your risk analyses are based in science. So you know, the old adage, good policy comes from good science, bad policy comes from bad science. Policy without science, without principle, isn't policy at all, it's fiat. So you've got all kinds of good science to rely upon here, as opposed to nothing. All right, so you got science or nothing, for your choices for your principle analyses. And I think everybody else has already said, you've heard it said that there are plenty of good ways. Hey, you can be like a business if you use carbon offset kinds of measures. They're available, as you've already heard from most speakers. And they are businesses that are many billions of dollars. I've worked in this area for being traded or worked on for IPOs in this area. So hopefully these will help you with some arguments you can use as you move forward, hopefully very soon. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Gary Proto.
Get my giddy on.
Welcome, Mr. Proto.
My name is Jerry Proto. I moved to Montana in 1981. Ran a successful upholstery shop for many years. But I was also witness to the Bakken boom with a particular interest. My family's allotment from the Turtle Mountain Indian Reservation shares the Montana-North Dakota border. So our mineral rights are on one side of the border, Montana's are on the other. And we had an opportunity to prevail in that Bakken boom, but the fact is, it had already been stolen. And I'm here to tell you, the Bakken boom stopped at the Montana border. And the production of oil and water will expose the biggest fraud that this country's ever seen. Because this crime started on the minimum drill spacing unit, where the minimum drill spacing is 160 acres, the same as 160-acre allotment of natives.
To step in, because
Thank you. Okay, so anyways, 160 acres is a minimum drill space unit. After 11,000 foot depth, it doubles in size. The proliferation of, I guess they call them stripper wells and wildcat wells, are defined by existing discoveries. Now, what's happened is a great theft from mineral owners within Montana. The minimum drill spacing requires that the production is less than 11,000 feet. The Bakken's at 12,000 feet and has been there for 1 million years. And it's my contention that the lack of integrity in the Montana Board of Oil and Gas Conservation in oversight, they strictly rely on operator numbers. They produce their own numbers, and those numbers are on the GIS server. Now, for more than a long time.
Close comments here shortly. Your time's up.
Time's up.
Yeah.
Well, can I leave this with you? I gave this to analysis. Joel Coleman, analyst for the Montana Environmental Quality Committee. And this information dates my communications with the state of Montana and the federal government going back to 2012. And I would like to make it available to anybody. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome, everybody. Thank you. Mr. Vincent. Matt Vincent. Welcome, Mr. Vincent.
Thank you, Director. Want to say that I appreciate you guys having these listening sessions. And one thing's for sure, MEPA has been up for discussion hundreds of times since it was first implemented in 1971. So for the record, I'm Matt Vincent, speaking tonight as Executive Director of the Montana Mining Association. I live down in Butte, next to the Berkeley pit. I understand what environmental impacts can come from actions. I'm a past elected official, former environmental educator. I would just kind of underscore one thing about the Montana Environmental Policy Act is that it is policy procedural. It's something that I think others have alluded to here tonight. I think we need to continue to strive for balance in how it is applied. There's a ton of ever increasing protective regulations that make sure that the nuts and bolts of projects from energy development to mining development are done so that they meet the environmental standards to protect our clean and healthful environment. Along those lines of balance, I think we need to look at all of the things that are in our Constitution. And not that the clean and healthful environment is a very crucial part of it for future generations, but it also states that you know, this act is to balance a productive and enjoyable harmony between humans and their environment. One of the other things that it refers to are the rights of pursuing life's basic necessities. And so I think taking those into consideration as you look at what are some of the changes you'd like to maybe bring to MEPA so that it can continue to serve and be debated in the future would be very important. And as to these analyses, I mean, obviously the health decision threw some things up in the air. That case is going to be challenged. It'll be some time before we understand how we move forward with this, but certainty, I've heard a lot of reference to greenhouse gas analyses and climate analyses. When and if we do those, let's decide on what it looks like so that there's certainty that if it is done, it's not going to be challenged over and over and over again, the way we see past decisions that come out of this.
Yeah.
And the alternative analysis, I think, is another one to pay attention to if we're truly worrying about long-term effects on our environment. Because from the mining's perspective, Montana has some of the best environmental regulations in the world. And if we don't mine these deposits where they're geologically available, they will be mined in places that would appall everybody in this room. So I guess balance is my urge in the continued conversation of how we look at this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent. Dan Harris.
Thank you very much. I have a lot of comments. I'm going to really try to pare down, assuming that the other topics will be covered. So a lot has been changed. A lot has changed since MEPA was enacted. So therefore, I believe MEPA should be modernized to include the impacts of greenhouse gases, their subsequent effect on our climate and our constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment. I'm going to pick on two things: coal strip specifically, and Northwestern Energy. Here's something to think about. Rosebud Mine supplies Colstrip with coal, and a pamphlet from them titled Rosebud's Tour Fact Sheet states, quote, Colstrip 3 and 4 uses 36,000 tons of coal per day. That's 72 million pounds. We can't conceptualize this, but in Helena, we watch the coal trains go by. 120 to 135 cars, 100 tons each. 100 tons per car. So, Colstrip burns the equivalent of 3 of these per day, not cars, 3 entire train loads. Every day, every week, every month, every year, year after year. So every 8 hours, the equivalent of 120 coal cars is burned. 3 per day, 100 tons every 12 minutes. How can this not be harmful? Lastly, once again, I'm abbreviating, so I'll give you the written comments. Thank you. I was an auto mechanic in the late 70s, early 80s. EPA said better mileage, better emissions. NHTSA said more safety. The auto industry university said this is impossible. We cannot technologically do this. It'll put us out of business and you won't be able to afford a car. Well, guess what? Cars are cleaner, they're safer, they have better fuel mileage, and ironically, the auto industry is promoting this to sell cars. So, I can assure you, everyone here, that, for example, if Northwestern Energy were required by law to be carbon neutral by 2030, just like the auto industry, it would be done. It's technically and economically feasible. Therefore, we need to update MEPA to include the impact of greenhouse gases and their effect on our climate and our constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment. Montana has a unique and exciting opportunity, starting with the recent Health versus State of Montana. The next step is to regulate greenhouse gases under MEPA. Thank you very much.
Anna Gates. Welcome, Ms. Gates.
My name is Anna Gates. I'm a 17-year-old senior at Capitol High. And I would like to say that I have really loved the input of all these super knowledgeable, fantastic adults. And though I do not have the experience or degrees and doctorates to give you a decisive solution, I don't have the numbers for you, but I have come up with a little commentary on some of the more negating opinions on the MEPA regulations. So there has been talk of the subjectivity of the MEPA system and its regulations. But I think that there is nothing more important than subjectivity to enable the ability of true and critical discernment when it comes to such serious issues as the effect humans and our activities have on our one extremely valuable Earth. I think that subjectivity and the ability to truly make informed scientific decisions is the most important ability that our MEPA regulations can enable and DEQ thereafter. In the sake of maintaining and respecting the diversity of our environments, we must maintain a diversity of avenues for their protection. Any hindrance of our MEPA regulations that allow the DEQ to create decisive, informed, and proactive decisions is in large a hindrance to our progression as a state. And truly, the incorporation and prioritization of regulating and predicting greenhouse gas emission effects is of utmost importance to maximize our state's efficiency and move us in a direction of environmental recovery. I think especially in the trajectory of our coal industries and CO2 emissions. I don't think that there has been a collective decision to use our resources, to use the solutions that are there that we can observe. And I think that we need to make a collective movement, collective decision to make those our priority. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Susan Debris. Welcome, Ms. Debris.
Thank you, and thank you for holding this hearings. Lived in Western Montana nearly all my life and here in Wyoming. One of my main men, I'm a retired pastor, and one of my main mentors was a man named Reverend George Harden, who was part of the Constitutional Convention and who made Montana his home, and recently this letter surfaced that he wrote to his children when they were preparing to move to Montana, and I'd like to read it and just make a couple comments. Won't read the whole thing. Rusty, Hal, Steve, and Nancy. Daddy's on the train coming home from a land that will be our new home before long. It's a land where the mountains are so tall that the snow on top of their heads becomes a part of the white clouds that float around them. And the earth and sky are one big picture that you could stand and look at, never quite believing it could be real. But it is real. But so is the absence of snow on the Mission Mountains now in the summer. The snowpacks are gone. You can touch the clean earth, except places where it's been contaminated. You can ride on horseback up and down the green grassy shoulders of the mountains to watch the deer and elk run, and see the black bear go lumbering off into the shade of the tall trees, and you can catch the glint of sunlight reflecting a rainbow from the leaping trout, which break the stillness of lakes so clear you can hardly see the water. And you can breathe the clean air and sing because you almost burst with joy. This was 70 years ago. And now we're hearing from the teachers that the kids can't get out and practice track. It's a land of the big sky, and you feel little standing under it in the bright sunlight on a crisp cloudless morning. Or lying on your back looking up at the night with stars so big and so near that you feel like you can reach up and touch them. And you learn what humility means. But at the same time you feel big. There's no place for little thoughts or narrow feelings. Too big a country for little things. I just encourage you to keep looking big and looking ahead. 6 great grandchildren now for me. And these young people, they need a chance to see this world the way God intended it. George was part of the Constitutional Convention and helped to write the preamble for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Creed. Francis Kromkowski. Welcome, Mr. Kromkowski.
Thank you, Director Dorrington, members of the DEQ staff. I'm Francis Kromkowski.
There you go.
And I've lived in Montana for the last 51 years. After 20 years of working in the area of protecting children and seniors in the Department of Public Health and Human Services, moved on to another 12 years working in the Community Development Block Grant Program at the Department of Commerce. And in that capacity, we've seen dozens of careful studies, and some not so careful, that I had to review. I've reviewed, literally probably 100 environmental impact statements as part of the Department of Commerce. I know how important it is to do those carefully. Now, the issue before us is not my past history on reviewing environmental impact statements. We're seeing that the Department of Environmental Quality has great responsibility in guaranteeing that the environmental impacts studies that are done correctly and done thoroughly. It seems, from what I can tell in studying the issue now, is that DEQ seems to think that they don't have the tools to do this now, but have to go through a process of gathering a consultant group, a stakeholders group, and then maybe bring that to the next legislature, and then maybe have a court case. Well, next legislature in 25, and have court cases after that, going all the way to the Supreme Court. I think that's a big mistake. DEQ now has the ability, as many of our testifiers have said, and the ability and the tools to do a solid analysis. And that solid analysis must include climate change as a component. It's a crucial component. The DEQ in the Helena versus Montana case stated that they do believe they could do this kind of analysis. So I think that although it's important to get consultation, I think you have the tools now. There's no more need to delay through this process. of a stakeholder group. What you need to do is do your duty under the Constitution, protect our children, including my 9 great grandchildren. So I thank you very much for considering my thoughts. But my thoughts are directed to you to do your job and not do any further delay in considering climate impact changes as part of the analysis under MEPA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Comcast. That's a tough one. Ryan Freistad. Freistad?
Pretty close.
Please state your name for us and
My
welcome.
name is Noreen Freistad,
Or read, catch that, please.
and thank you for this opportunity tonight. I live in Helena, and I'm currently representing Northern Plains Resource Council with this testimony. We are very concerned about climate impacts that are currently happening in our state, our nation, and our world at large. The spotlight is on Montana, as our state has a huge amount of coal, oil, and gas reserves. And if those were to be developed, the climate impact would be significantly greater than most other states who have lesser reserve potentials. The Health versus Montana decision is clear in its directive. The state of Montana has to identify a method to measure the carbon impact of greenhouse gases that are heating up our state and our planet. DEQ's 3 questions posed on the website to Montanans for comments on MEPA are: 1, changes to modernize MEPA; 2, what should an analysis of greenhouse gas emissions and climate impacts include; and 3, what opportunities exist for state agencies to be more thorough, balanced, efficient, and consistent. I feel like these are inadvertent distractions, as the task before DEQ is simply to identify the method which carbon impacts are measured. There are more than enough models available to choose from as these assessments are being conducted across the globe. Montana only needs a reliable emissions accounting that focuses on 1, extraction of fossil fuels; 2, processing and transportation of fossil fuels; and 3, consumption of fossil fuels by end users. I would encourage DEQ to choose a reliable method to measure emissions that are choking our air, so Montanans can focus on how we can change the dangerous trajectory we are currently on. Thank you for this opportunity.
Linda Freistad. Linda.
Is it Nigel?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
We can't hear you out here. Speak louder.
Linda Bishop.
Thank you.
While we're allowing the clapping, it is taking time. I'm just telling you, we're taking minutes in between, so I'd probably ask that all speakers from this point adhere to the 2 minutes. We have individuals online that also speak. Thank you.
Just no clapping.
Thank you. I appreciate your tolerance of my hearing. My name is Linda Bishop. I live in Helena. We have land on the divide as well, outside town. I have a lot of empathy for you folks. I'm in the state of life for years. I'm retired. I'm sure that I'm not the only one in this room that could say that. And many of us, I think, that we're subject matter experts, which is, I suspect, a term you may use in your agency as well. So our duty is to provide the data, to do the analysis, and we may not be the decision makers, but decision makers can make decisions if they don't have to face the data and the analysis. I believe Judge Seeley's instruction ruling in the health case gave you your instructions. And I checked your website. What is the mission of the Department of Environmental Quality? And it says it's to champion. I love that word, to champion, not, diddle, not call a committee, not, waste time, not wait for an upstairs bureaucrat to give you the go-ahead, but to champion a healthy environment. That's a constitutional statement. For thriving Montana. And you're hearing Montana isn't thriving right now due to the climate crisis. So I would urge you, as many have here, collect the data, fulfill your mission, and let the chips fall But, you know, administrations, politics, they come and go. Montana is gonna be here. Montanans want it to be here for our children, our grandchildren, and we want it to be clean and healthy. So, from one, you know, retired bureaucrat to folks that are on the hot seat right now for a lot of things. I feel you, I thank you, and I thank you for your tolerance of me. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Paxton. We didn't know any further to Haley. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Haley Moran Torgerson. I'm a junior at Capitol High School in Helena. I'm the co-president of the Montana High School Democrats and the president of the Lewis and Clark High School Democrats. Climate change is the defining issue of our time, and we are at a defining moment. From shifting weather patterns that threaten food production to rising sea levels that increase the risk of catastrophic flooding. Climate change was associated with greater distress overall, and especially in young people with low levels of generalized anxiety. I'm concerned for my future and my kids' future and my kids' future. Climate health, it should be a priority for us. I'm concerned that people are more concerned with economic profit and production than they are with the health of our planet, our home. Climate change is impacting health in a multitude of ways, including by leading to death and illness from increasingly frequent extreme weather events, such as heat waves, storms, and floods. The climate impacts are already harming health through air pollution, disease, extreme weather events, forced displacement, pressure on mental health, and increased hunger and poor nutrition in places where people cannot grow or find sufficient food. Climate change is affecting everyone. It's affecting me, my classmates, my family, my friends, and every single person in this room. And yet it's still not taken as seriously as it should. The people are begging me to do something for me, for everyone in this room, and everyone on this planet. I hate even thinking about my future, about the future health of this planet, because I've done everything in my power to fix this issue. Now it is up to you to listen to our voices and finally make a change. If we continue down this path, it will destroy any chances of future life on our Earth. Without a healthy natural world, humans will not survive. Thank you.
Thank you. Newton. Ken. Means Rob. Price tag? Yes. Welcome, Mr. Price now.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rob Freistad. I live here in Helena. I am a recovering teacher after 20 years, but have been in business much longer. As a retiree, I try to place myself in your place as employees of the state agency that is likely frowned upon by those who have no problem selling our state to the highest bidders when it relates to resource extraction. But all of us are depending on you. MEPA has been streamlined or weakened many times, but times are changing, and it's time to consider environmentally sensitive projects even more carefully than ever before. We're witnessing the ill effects of climate change more each year, and scientists project that this rate will only become more rapid. MEPA's purpose is to analyze and publicly illuminate all aspects of the proposal. Montana has witnessed the free will of the corporations who would benefit financially from freely doing what they will, the Butte Pit, the Clark Fort, Zortman Landesky, and the list goes on. And in each of these cases, corporations had their say. They took the money and they left the public to clean up the mess. DEQ is charged with protecting the public from these opportunists. Montana has a unique role to play in the global climate crisis with the preponderance of natural resources that we hold. It is far cheaper to thoroughly analyze and project a project. It is far cheaper to thoroughly analyze a project and assure that it proceeds responsibly than it is to clean up the mess once it's created. DEQ is charged to represent Montanans, not corporations. If you think that considering tough subjects like climate change is difficult and burdensome today, then what will you do when you face the myriad of complications and expenses projected from climate change as those complications mount because we delay addressing our effects on the environment today? Stop thinking in the short term. Stop thinking of your funding, even of your current careers. Instead, think of the children, think of the unborn children who will be cursed with spending all of their resources on fixing the mistakes that we've handed down to them because there was money to be made and jobs to be kept. Thank you.
Wilbur Raymond. Welcome, Mr. Raymond.
Good evening. My name is Wilbur Raymond. I live here in Helena, and I'm a retired state employee. And I worked at your predecessor agency, the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. In that position, I was a project manager of an EIS done by DNRC back in the late 70s and 80s on the Kootenai Falls Dam proposal on the Kootenai River. In that capacity, I hired a team of expert scientists to evaluate the impacts of that project on the local environment, the state environment, and all of the environment in developing us here in Montana. And I know that in the following agency that you are now a part of, DEQ, that the charge under MEPA is yours, as it was mine 40 years ago. And I urge you to incorporate the held decision and the court order to include climate change and greenhouse gases in your evaluation. It's time. You have the expertise, you have the scientists, and you have the authority to do this. There are models out there that you can find to do the analysis that needs to be done. And I urge you to take this task on and do it. Just as I had to do it when I worked at the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. That was my responsibility then, and it's your responsibility now. You are our eyes and ears looking at all these projects, and please incorporate these latest changes to MEPA by the courts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raymond. You, Zach, welcome, Mrs. Zach.
Thanks for the opportunity to comment. While Montana's environmental laws were once the national standard for wise stewardship, recent years have seen a legislative race to the bottom when it comes to protecting air and water quality, mine reclamation requirements, land use decisions, and other resource management issues. And those who don't want us to know the consequences of state actions have moved aggressively to reduce agencies' time and level of consideration of the environmental impacts of state actions. Fortunately, we have a constitution that empowers Montanans to assert their right to know and their right to a quality environment. MEPA is a key public information tool to ensure that these constitutional rights are honored. So do we need to spend our time updating the Montana Environmental Policy Act and how it's administered? The answer is a flat no. Instead, DEQ and other state agencies simply need to administer MEPA in a manner that meets their obligation for full disclosure of government actions and consequences, including the biological, social, and economic impacts of climate change. The right to know and the right to a quality environment are bedrock rights of Montanans. The Montana Environmental Policy Act reflects a crucial state policy to secure, not short circuit, those rights. Thank you.
Very good question.
Give it a hat to your handwriting. Very easy read.
Welcome,
Ms. Clark.
Almer method. Hi, my name is Mary Clark. I appreciate you being here. With my children and grandchildren, we cover seven generations in Montana. I have loved being in Montana my whole life. I've watched Montana change over my years here. Things are very different than when I was a child. I have watched rivers and land change. Rivers running orange with debris and chemicals outside of my house so I couldn't swim in it. I've seen our beautiful skies become smoky for many summer days. I've seen improvements from the implementation of some environmental actions. We need to continue to address our impact on our land and water and air. We as citizens need to receive information from you and proposers so that we can continue to evaluate and address what is happening as a result of the use of our state to help you avoid jumping off cliffs. I implore you to use the technology and processes you have to review the impact on our health, our earth, our communities. Don't delay to mull over process changes. Use your data, the data that science has given you, and address issues here now. I appreciate you for continuing to listen to us, the citizens in the state of Montana. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Can I get a raise of anyone's hand in the room that made it past the sign-in that would like to speak yet? Raise your hand high. So there's 3, 4. Okay, I'm gonna go online first since those people have already registered, and then if we have time, I'll continue and extend.
I'm gonna ask them to raise their hands.
Okay, that'd be great.
For folks joining us on Zoom, would you please raise your hand if you would like to speak? We have the sign-up sheet from the advanced registration, but there are significantly more people registered than there are online. Please raise your hand.
No one online has raised their hand. So I'm going to reiterate that for those online, they can address comments online in the portal or after we address the 4 individuals in the room that would like to speak. We'll go back to the online option. Please be ready if you would like to speak online. You guys can self-administer. Whomever would like to go first, please come and announce your name.
Helena, apologize for trying to step out of order earlier. It's hard to hear.
No. Say your name at the mic one time, please.
Sure. My name is David Henian. I'm a resident of Jefferson County and Director Dorrington and staff. You've asked, how do you do analysis of climate? I say with compassion, with an understanding that we are all connected. you, me, the governor, the legislature, Montana's youth. Every living thing is connected. Visualize for one moment a person or a group of people, or one living thing that you love deeply. Please act compassionately at the task at hand to defend that person, that creature's survivability, now and for future generations. If we understand that we are all connected, we understand that there is no other way other to analyze what affects our climate than the mandate that we will do no further harm to any living part of our planet, no further harm to God's creation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hammy. Next up, students. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, you mind if I jump in front of you real quick? Sorry, real quick. I'll be brief.
Will you state your name? Clearly?
Yeah, Tom Caffrey, high school science teacher and closet Swiftie. Hey, thanks for coming tonight. It's great to see all the young folks here in particular. As a high school teacher, it's my job to kind of break down some of the complex information that we've especially heard tonight regarding policy and the direction we want to see our state take in regards to like our climate future. And as I said, I thought about it. The best I could think of, the best thing we can do is go back to an old saying that there's not a right way to do the wrong thing. And burning coal is the wrong thing. The single best thing we can do in our state is to quit burning coal, keep it in the ground, and also quit putting it on trains, sending it to the West Coast and shipping it off to South Korea and Japan so they can burn it. It's the same planet. They're burning it in the same place we live. If they're planet B, that needs to stop. Carbon dioxide is a pollutant. Please treat it accordingly. Thank you.
Welcome, students.
Hi, I'm Edward Franklin. I'm with Helena High School Group. Jill Van Alstein is my teacher. I just want to say thank you to her for making me more aware of the climate. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here speaking today. So thank you. We took a trip to Livingston for the Montana Youth Climate Summit the other week, and we had a chance to speak to Dr. Steve Running, and he told us that by 2100, our Montana would be raised by 6 degrees if we don't do anything about carbon emissions or greenhouse gases. And that means we'd lose our snow, and Glacier National Park would be gone pretty much. And I think it's important that for future generations who want to experience snow, and my kids who want to learn how to ski, snowboard, go visit Glacier, build snowmen, I think it's important that we reduce those greenhouse gases and carbon emissions because snow is such an important part of Montana. And people around the world come to visit Glacier National Park, and if they come to visit past 2100, if we don't do anything, it's not going to be there. It's going to be non-existent. So I really hope that you all are aware that this is happening, and I hope that it gets implemented soon. Thank you.
And last commenter in the room.
Hi, I'm Mia Jamel Morris, and I'm a sophomore at Helena High. I'm also part of the Green Group. And I am just really concerned for my future and for my kids' future and my grandchildren's future. I want them to be able to experience snow. I've experienced snow my whole life, and I think it's a terrible consequence to take that away from future generations. And I hope that your job is to protect Montana's future, and I hope that you keep that in mind as you make your decision, because protecting Montana's future is really important in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. One more. Welcome.
My name is John Aaron. I reside in Helena. For 17 years, I worked for the state. 10 years in Department of Environmental Quality as a permit specialist. But more importantly, 6 years dealing with coal mine EISs and that part of it was 4 years of writing environmental impact statements, 19 of them total. More importantly, Amcon of Minerals, we did a comprehensive EIS on the whole operation, even though we were only permitting a small part of that mine expansion. And the same with Colstrip, we did the same thing on Colstrip. We took a comprehensive look at the whole complex, including the generating plants. So along those lines, I think that the health decision mandates that you do a comprehensive EIS on all of the carbon greenhouse gas emissions and break it down by categories such as oil and gas, power generation, transportation, coal sales, housing, which kind of triggers from DEQ's permitting of septic systems, water systems, and the Public Service Commission and how they fit into it. Because I actually 1 month ago testified to the Public Service Commission, you know, raising the concerns about Colstrip 30-year, actually 2050, getting to zero emissions, when in fact they said they can, for a 12% increase, get to 30%, 2030, get to zero emissions. In my mind, 12% is nothing. They should basically do that given the crisis that we're facing. The crisis is that the timeline is accelerating, and I can get into a lot of the details, but in the short of it is that in the last 800,000 years, we've had glacial periods. About every 100,000 years, we go through glaciers and warming, and then driven by CO2, basically in the Antarctic, that there's a cycle of dead, dying critters fall to the bottom, and then they get swept up. When the warm waters drift on, then that releases carbon gases and our temperatures go up. But historically, carbon dioxide has never gone to the levels we have right now. We're at 2 times that historic peak. The same with methane. Methane is 100 times to 28 times more reactive. It has a life of 10 years. Carbon dioxide has a life of 1,000 years. We're preloading. There's no way that we're going to stop the cliff that we're going to go off. The central part of the United States and a lot of Africa, South America will be uninhabitable. The humidity will go so high, and the temperature will go so high that it will just basically kill people. And they don't have the resources to turn on the air conditioning. Closing comment. 100 billion people are projected to die, probably more like 2 or 3 billion. And it'll be mostly falling on the poor people of the world. The timeline again is 2050 now, which they said was 2021. All this ocean levels are going to go up at least 10 feet by 2050. That'll basically destroy all the ports in the world, all the major real estate. There is no way the economy of the world can withstand that kind of hit. And by, for instance, the low islands of the East Asia will be underwater, and they're projecting by 2050, that it'll be 25 feet rise, but actually now that's probably closer to the 2021.
Last statement, Mr. Heron.
So we are facing the worst nightmare you could put into a movie. We really are. And all the kids that are raising now are going to have to pay the price. And even Montana is going to be affected, but we're lucky in the fact that we're probably better off than a lot of the world. And so we need to do this for the betterment of the world and our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heron. Anyone speaking online?
I do want to recognize that I think there was some concern about whether the Zoom was functioning appropriately since there were no hands raised. But I have confirmed that folks online can in fact hear us. So if you are online and you would like to comment, this is your last chance. Please raise your hand.
Oh, no. All right. Thank you. for your robust, public engagement here and the comments that we received. We really need to take it seriously. We appreciate, in particular, the students that have made it out today. Not to discredit anyone else's input, but I particularly appreciate that. No, thanks and have a good night.
I'd like to thank you all again. Thank you. Thank you.